So hi everyone, I'm Jean Baptiste of Forbes, and I write for Forbes on technology and innovation and investing. As you can tell, I'm originally French. Well, not for my look, but at least from my accent. And so I'm really excited to moderate this panel of tech luminaries on Bitcoin and virtual currencies. So just a quick roundup of some of the recent news on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has been taking a beating with lawsuits, arrests, regulators, apps taking away. It's been illegal in China, in Russia. CNN headline today, Bitcoin is under siege. Bloomberg, the glitch that will kill Bitcoin. Bitcoin's problems are much worse than you thought. That's the LA Times. Bitcoin crash is gold's game. So if you want to invest in something secure and safe, gold is a new. But wait, there's hope. Israel aims to become the Bitcoin hotspot. So if you're Israeli startup, maybe there's that's the new Silicon Valley for Bitcoin. So just a quick summary on there's at least 93 virtual currencies used today with total valuation of $13 billion exchanged. And Bitcoin alone is about 9 billion of these. So, just a few facts to keep in mind when we're going to talk about this really exciting new area. So first, I'm going to ask the panel to quickly introduce themselves and so who you are, what you do, and if you're bullish or not on Bitcoin.
Nick? Yeah. Great. I'm Nick Shalek. I'm a partner with Ribbit Capital. Ribbit is a venture fund that's focused entirely on investing in disruptive consumer-facing businesses in the financial services world. So we've been investors in Bitcoin for a long time now, almost 2 years at this point, and we are quite bullish. I think you'd be hard pressed to find other investors who are more bullish on this space than us. I think we'll get into there's a lot of uncertainty around Bitcoin and how it'll play out, but fundamentally we think this is the most important innovation in the financial world in a few decades, if not longer. So.
My name is Jered Kenna. I founded the first U.S. Bitcoin exchange called TradeHill. I also own 20 Mission, which is a 41-bedroom hacker house in San Francisco. I recently launched moneyandtech.com, which is a video news site for digital currencies, financial tech innovation. I'm very bullish on digital currencies in general, and I'm bullish on Bitcoin, but if Bitcoin doesn't win, we're all going to be using digital currencies for sure before too long.
My name is Paige Freeman. I'm the VP of Sales at BitPay. We are the leading payment processor for accepting Bitcoin. Many merchants out there think that they don't want to accept Bitcoin because they don't want to deal with the volatility. They don't want to deal with one day it's $500, the next day it's $400. And so what we do is we make it very easy for companies to accept Bitcoin, and then we convert right back to dollars or euros or yen. And so definitely bullish on Bitcoin, that's all we do. And as Jered said, if it evolves into something else, then that's something we would be open to as well.
I'm Bill Tai. I'm a venture capitalist. I built up the Charles River Ventures office out here. It's an East Coast-based firm. I've been in the venture business since '91, so 23 years, and have funded maybe 110 companies over that time. I've got stakes in 3 Bitcoin-related companies, and one side story. I got my my passion for virtual currencies around Second Life because Philip Rosedale is a really good friend of mine, and in Second Life, I helped him actually create that currency system, and I'm Alan Greenspan Gollum in Second Life.
Great. Hi everybody, my name is David Chen. I'm with Lightspeed Venture Partners. Been there about 2 years. Prior to that, I was a product manager at Facebook and co-founded a dating startup. Prior to that, I did a PhD at Harvard in economics and computer science. So Bitcoin is kind of one of the first investment areas that actually uses a little bit of that background, which is very exciting to me. And overall, I and the firm are quite bullish on Bitcoin.
So just in time.
Yes, real time.
Who you
Sounds
are.
like people were just saying who they were.
Yes.
Some of you are here this morning know. William Quigley with Clearstone Venture Partners. Began my career with an incubator called IdeaLab many years ago. And we have multiple incubators actually today. We typically focus on specific sectors for each incubator. And with Bitcoin, we have an incubator as well. It's in Southern California. And we've probably made, I think, 12 investments now in the Bitcoin space. About half of those are outside of the US and the rest are in the US.
So everyone here is bullish on Bitcoin. So let me just repeat. So it's illegal in China, it's illegal in Russia. You can get sued, arrested, take your app away from the App Store. So what's wrong with you? Or with me? So I don't know. Start. Why are you guys so bullish on Bitcoin, despite all the?
Okay, so we all know that the media is not always correct.
That's
Okay, so let's make
Don't
that.
believe everything you read.
Okay, it's the whole thing. I kind of think of it as the Lindsay Lohan effect. I mean, if something really bad happens, everyone's going to pay attention to it. So that's a good thing. It's fine. But like I said, it's a newer technology, and as time goes on, we believe, most people up here, I would imagine, believes that because we're only going to have so many in circulation, the price of Bitcoin is going to go up drastically. So you can look at it as a digital gold. You can look at it as, if you're a merchant, you can accept Bitcoin as a form of payment and save on your transaction cost. Visa, MasterCard, PayPal usually charges between 2% and 3%. You have payment fraud. You have what they call chargebacks, because if they decide to reverse that charge, then you've shipped a product, and it's a merchant's fault. It's not the credit card processor. They're not going to take responsibility for that. So, it's one of those things where the press is going to say the negative. They're going to, talk about arrest, but we don't even know the real story. So I don't like that people already assume that that's the truth about Bitcoin, and so that's why we're here, and we're to explain Bitcoin and to answer any
So
questions.
what's the legal status of Bitcoin? Can we use Bitcoin, and what's?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it. And you can use it in China. Ownership is not outlawed. What they did is they restricted the use of it by banks and some merchants. You can own it though, right? That's the reason the miners it's a very popular thing for the miners. And as long as you don't convert to fiat, just currency, just traditional currency, which, by the way, most of the diehard Bitcoin proponents don't like the fact people convert it to fiat, right? They would prefer it's just used like any other traditional currency. And yeah, there are countries, I would say actually China by no means has the final say been written there. India, yes. I think India they're very concerned about their currency. It's a difficult place to operate. I have a couple of financial services firms there, very difficult. India's probably irrelevant for Bitcoin for some period of time. And the US, leaning, I would say, positive, right? For the most part, the regulatory environment here now looks a little bit benign. The real issue is the lack of a regulatory point of view. That's the real issue. Because the banks, for any of you who have a Bitcoin company, the banks, as you know, really don't want to work with you. And even though you comply with all the AML requirements and whatnot, they just don't know. And because they don't know, because there's 17 federal regulatory agencies that have said this is our domain, we're in a state of confusion. And that confusion is exacerbated by the fact that the U.S. government defines what a security is. It defines what a commodity is, and it defines what cash is, what currency is. And by those definitions, Bitcoin falls in no category. And so as a result, it's sort of an up for grabs type of thing. And the regulators are saying, well, who should control this? Who should regulate it? I, for one, am very much looking forward to the state of New York finally coming out with some sort of regulatory announcement. Then the banks will say, comply with that, and we can do business with you. that we're in a stalemate, and the stalemate is actually what's hurting the Bitcoin, I think, growth in the U.S.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I was at Wells Fargo Bank yesterday, in fact, talking to some of the folks.
Wells Fargo, yeah.
You may have heard Wells Fargo call the summit. And I've forgotten the exact name of the person that called the summit, but he's in charge, the person that called the summit, his job there is he's in charge of fraud and kind of fraud
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right? So they are doing exactly what you said. They're waiting for clarity on the regulations, and they're kind of excited to hear, it depends on who you talk to at the bank, they're excited to hear that the New York Financial Services Board has said they'll come out with a ruling before year end, because there are so many laws around taking part, touching money that has been laundered, that as an executive with a bank, there are actually, they could go to jail if they are found later to have passed through things that were laundered. So to them, it's actually a criminal offense. So they're frozen, waiting for clarity. But some of the banks were more aggressive. Some have said, I think, like the folks at Citibank and or I guess J.P. Morgan,
Yeah.
very definitively kind of against it at the top.
They just, I don't know if you saw, they just came out with a note.
Oh, did they?
I saw it
Yeah,
today,
today.
where they surprised they don't like it.
Yeah, Jamie Dimon called it fad like a few weeks ago. But yeah, so I think, and so back to why I believe in it. I think your point about price and kind of as a reserve thing, it is what people believe it's worth, and I think all prices are really a function of supply and demand. And so if you believe that the supply side has high integrity and really is fixed, and if you believe then that demand can grow over time with more credibility, and there'll be dampeners in demand every once in a while and an exchange goes down or something, or a few people get arrested. But if you believe that the long-term trend on demand is up and supply is fixed, then by definition the price should go up over time. And that's what I've come to that conclusion.
So you think that supply is fixed, that there's no, bug, backdoors or anything?
I believe that, yes.
System is secure.
I'll believe that till, if and when I'm proven wrong, I'll be proven wrong, but I believe that now. I do wonder what will be the impact later if there are derivatives, because those sort of like shadow banking in fiat currency world, there may be a way to sort of artificially create supply. But I think we're a long way away from that, and I think for now the supply is so small on a relative basis, I think the price is going to go up.
You created one of those exchanges.
Yeah.
So what's an exchange? Maybe for the ones who are not.
I mean, obviously there's a few ways to get Bitcoin. You can sell something for Bitcoin. You can mine it, which I don't suggest. It's evolved to the point where it's not something that individuals will probably want to get into. Or you can trade dollars or, whatever currency you want for it, which is difficult. The problem is you're mixing oil and water here. I mean, Bitcoin is completely non-reversible. Every financial system we have, with the exception of cash, is basically designed to be reversible. So you're dealing with a situation where it's the reverse type of fraud than what we're really used to. Someone will send you the dollars, you give them the Bitcoin, and then they try to yank the dollars back. And banks typically default, and PayPal, things like that, typically default to just giving you your money back. Like, I bought things off eBay. Like, one time a guy sent me an iPhone, it was bad. I called him up, I had my money back in like 2 hours. It's ridiculous. They don't want you to prove it or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So running an exchange is extremely difficult to integrate with the existing financial system. But if you want to know why I'm bullish on Bitcoin, I think it's because our existing financial system is terrible and it sucks, and it shouldn't take 3 days to send money to someone in Europe to wait for it to get confirmed. We're using technology that's 50 years old. If I ever have grandkids, I don't think they will believe me that you could take a piece of paper, write down how much money you wanted to give someone, sign it, and then it just leaves your account. It's ridiculous. So I think the fact that we can send money around the world nearly instantly with Bitcoin with essentially no fees, when companies like Western Union charge at least 10% on average, is pretty ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. So where are the opportunities in this Bitcoin ecosystem? Is it the marketplaces, the exchange, where?
The investment opportunities.
Yeah.
I'd probably break it down into 3 buckets. The first thing you can do if you want to invest in Bitcoin is just to hold the underlying currency. I think the case has already been made on this panel for why Bitcoin itself might be valuable. Anything that has a, that is useful and scarce has a price, and its price will go up in proportion with how useful it is or how much demand there is for it. If you believe Bitcoin as a payment network or as a technology has use, and that use will go up as more and more people adopt it, then you probably should be a holder of Bitcoin. And that's certainly been our perspective on why it's worthwhile to hold Bitcoin. The second thing you can do is build a business like Paige or Jered have, and build sort of infrastructure that supports the Bitcoin ecosystem. So here we think about exchanges to help people get fiat currency sort of into the Bitcoin system, or buy a seat in the Bitcoin system is a way of thinking about it. Wallets to hold Bitcoin, merchant services or merchant tools to help merchants accept Bitcoin. So the basic kind of building blocks of any financial system. And the third thing, and probably this is a much bigger category, and why all of us are most excited about it, is because this is really like a powerful new technological framework or protocol for transferring value without a trusted third party, for keeping track of ownership, for proving existence. And that's really kind of the underlying technology problem that's been solved here. And there are lots of, we can talk, hopefully we will on this panel, about some of the really interesting things that Bitcoin might enable, besides just a faster, cheaper payment network that doesn't have fraud, which in and of itself is a really, as Jered points out, is a really powerful and long overdue thing.
So you point out to something, it's basically a protocol more than a virtual currency. I mean, the power of Bitcoin is this fact that you can exchange without a central authority.
Yeah, or I think you can think of it a different way. Money, or the money aspects of Bitcoin, are kind of almost the first application on top of the protocol. So TCP/IP is just a protocol for a way of explaining how you move packets of information. The blockchain, the sort of fundamental problem that Satoshi solved, is kind of a protocol for how you, in a decentralized fashion, settle a bunch of transactions, settle and verify transactions. But the money aspect of it is kind of an app that's on top of that, the thing that looks like and acts like gold, or people might use as a store of value or as a payment network. But there are other things that you can do with this new system for proof of ownership.
TCP/IP of money.
Yeah.
Yes. Bill, you've invested in several Bitcoin startups. Can you tell a little bit? And you're launching one tonight.
Tonight
Okay.
after this, and I'm launching one at the Silicon Valley Bitcoin meetup. But yeah, so I have stakes in. There's one in Australia called CoinJar, that it's about 7 months old and doing about 10 million a month now in gross transactions. And someone talked about banking relationships. I think the reason that one seems to be working is that they have a quote, an official relationship with National Bank of Australia. They actually had one with Commonwealth Bank, who dropped them, and then NAB picked them up. But you can actually kind of walk into the teller and move your money into CoinJar account and kind of trade and pull it out. So I think that relationship has been one of the main issues around Bitcoin acceptance, which is trust and credibility. I've got the one I'm launching tonight is actually sort of a relaunch of a company that has already built a marketplace. It's it's a bunch of eBay guys that built something called Glide, G-L-Y-D, and it's a place where you can sell iPhones, iPads, tablets, Samsung phones, Blackberries, gaming consoles, and there's a lot of people that will basically buy and sell products on there. And as tomorrow morning, it's going to be Bitcoin enabled. So, you know, about a month ago, I was looking for more ways to acquire Bitcoin, and I was a little kind of leery of just sending US dollars to these random exchanges overseas. And I walked into a board meeting and I said, you know what? This company already has an escrow function, and it takes in goods, and I have a lot of old consumer electronics. Why can't you just take my stuff and pay me in Bitcoin? So it's a reality, and starting tomorrow, you can basically sell anything you want in the SKUs that they carry and get your payment in Bitcoin. I just funded something with Bobby Lee, the CEO of BTC China, Charles Lee, who invented Litecoin, and Jen McCaleb, who created eDonkey, and Mt. Gox, and Ripple. And that one launches in about a month, and it's
stealth.
It's a stealth company, but it should be very exciting.
You heard it here first.
What is it called?
That was called MyCoin.
Dave, investments?
Yeah, so the main investment we've made in this space so far is BTC China, and we made that before there's any clarity
Mm-hmm.
from regulators. I think our announcement was announced a couple months after the investment was actually made. And so we kind of knew we were going to be in for a crazy ride, and it's been fun so far. You know, Chen has been very up and down. They were kind of the reason for the recent run up and the recent crash before this past week. That's probably the
And you're
biggest
still
investment.
bullish on Bitcoin, on the
Yeah,
whole
so
sector.
I didn't answer that question when it went around, but I think if you just take a step back, I think there are a lot of questions from regulators around, what are we going to be able to track down the money launderers, et cetera, et cetera. I think taking a step back, I think these are all solvable problems, and governments and law enforcement will figure out how to deal with virtual currencies. And as that happens, and as people in government get more comfortable with virtual currencies, I think those regulations will move in a direction, so that consumers will get what they want. That's ultimately what's going to happen, right? So if it's the case that enough people in the U.S. and whatever countries want to use Bitcoin and other virtual currencies, if there's enough interest, they will speak to government officials and laws will be changed. So I think in the longer term, assuming that the protocol isn't broken, if there's some fundamental flaw, I only see a bright future if you look long enough.
So secure protocol, limited supply, it's better than gold. Any investments?
Yeah, we have a few investments in the space. Our largest investment is in a company called Coinbase, which is a U.S. service that offers brokerage, so a way to buy and sell Bitcoin, offers merchant tools to help merchants accept Bitcoin, and also a wallet service so consumers can hold Bitcoin. We will soon be announcing a couple of other investments. Probably not ready to talk about them yet, but also are holders of Bitcoin and have been for some time. And so we see that as a way of investing in the whole ecosystem, and think people who are interested in Bitcoin or are excited about it should do that as well.
Are you paying your entrepreneurs in Bitcoin?
I get paid in Bitcoin.
Are you
I do.
William?
Is it your salary?
Yes, I mean, not my complete salary. Okay, I'll be honest about that. However, it is a good way to accept Bitcoin is to have the deduction every time I'm paid. And I love Bitcoin because we have a partnership with a company called Gift, G-Y-F-T, and they're based in San Francisco. But they make it very easy for you to take Bitcoin and go to a Target or a Crate and Barrel, because what they do is they have a mobile app where you can buy gift cards with Bitcoin through BitPay. And so you can be in a restaurant, it would probably need to be a chain restaurant, but where they would have a gift certificate online, and you would just pay in Bitcoin at that moment, and then you'd have the code that would say that you have this $100 credit at this restaurant, and then hand that to the server, and it's a done deal. So as time goes on, and as we signed the Sacramento Kings recently, and they accept Bitcoin now, which some people think it's just marketing, PR, but no, if you really look at who heads up the Kings, and he's a visionary, and he saw Bitcoin just like a Richard Branson. It's just one of those things where it will become more mainstream. It is in the tech geek stage. If you take a look at it and really do your research, I think you'll become just as addicted to it as we are. Because if you go to one of these meetups, like tonight, there's one, in an hour after this, you go in and there's such enthusiasm to where at the end of these events, people are pushing you out the door because once you learn about Bitcoin and really get the right information, it's just something to really think about, and you can get creative and start up companies and help on the consumer. I think consumer side is where we need the most help. Payment processing is pretty much covered.
So you have an idea of how many businesses, where can you use your Bitcoin, or you need to have obviously a intermediary like BitPay to actually
accept the Bitcoin. Well, if you want to convert back to dollars, but we can also accept Bitcoin on your behalf, and then you would need to give us a way to route the money to you. But it's
so I can go to Target, In-N-Out Burger, and pay with Bitcoin.
Not In-N-Out. I don't have In-N-Outs on there yet. I mean, I'll put that on my list. But no, Tiger Direct recently started accepting Bitcoin, which is great because they have the right customer base for that. And so I find that many companies are reaching out to BitPay, but they They're concerned maybe they don't have the right customers, they won't know how to buy Bitcoin, and then why would they care? So I think as we move along, we're going to hit the travel industry. Perhaps we have Virgin Galactic, but I don't know how many people are going to travel to space with Bitcoin. But
Eight so far.
yeah, it was just 6 the other day. So I guess.
Are you going?
I did. I was on Necker Island last week with Sir Richard, and he did ask me that, and I didn't commit yet.
Yeah. Sell one of those Bitcoins of yours.
Yeah. A few of them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. William, investments.
We've made a lot of investments. One thing though I'd like to just chat about is on the regulatory front, because it's always asked. I was an early investor in PayPal, and we were sued by dozens of attorneys general, dozens. Cars Direct, which was a company that you could buy a car online. I didn't know it at the time, but that was illegal. And we got sued by 49 of the 50 attorneys general. The one state where it's okay is Michigan, right? Every other state, the dealers have paid off their state legislators, so you can't do that. And my point is that with Bitcoin, it's an awkward thing today to use to buy something, right? It's not easy. And in fact, I don't even think that's the main value. I think the blockchain is the more interesting part, the transmission, if you want to call it, network of Bitcoin. As a payment mechanism, it'll be a long time before Bitcoin comes close to being as interesting as PayPal. It just is. It's too difficult for the average person, I think, to use. And the real issue with it, and I'm a fan, I just think there's other things we can do with Bitcoin. I do a lot of investing outside of the US, and it's very useful. And it's useful because of the fact that trust is irrelevant in a transaction. And that's a strange notion in a financial network. Trust is completely unimportant with Bitcoin because it's as though someone just gave you gold. Now, if they gave you gold, could you assay it on your own instantly? Probably not. But you can effectively do that with the blockchain. It tells you if the coin is genuine. Now, these are the things that excite me about this. Something that is absolutely certain to be genuine, the store of value you're receiving, and no need to have any faith or trust in the counterparty. Those are the things that haven't yet evolved, or the types of companies that are going to come as a result of those developments. But as that starts to spread into the consciousness, just like in the early web days, these capabilities suddenly spawned whole new ways of thinking about how to do business. I think that's the future. I like Bitcoin, and I think it's useful in certain sorts of things. But yes, for most people, particularly Americans, I don't think it's a simple way to pay. In the future, perhaps, but it's still scary. You go lose your password to your wallet. There's no one to call. Those coins are gone.
So prepare your questions. You'll be next. So my last question is: so Bitcoin is not the only. It's not the only virtual currency. There's that. As I said, it was like 93. There's like BitJam, Catcoin, Sexcoin, and this one I know how to use that. So what's the Bitcoin today? Maybe Catcoin tomorrow, or how do you think this is going to play with all those virtual currencies?
I mean, Bitcoin's got such a head start, and just the network effect, the fact that you have companies like BitPay built on it. Also, with a couple exceptions, these coins don't really bring anything new. Like Ripple brings a lot of new things to it, but Litecoin, different proof of work, a couple other changes. Sometimes they have different models for how the money supply is created, but generally there's not anything that big. Ripple being the exception. So if anything is really competing with it as a whole, I'd say it's possibly Ripple. I don't expect something like Litecoin or Dogecoin, as cute as Dogecoin is, to really pass Bitcoin anytime soon.
I think these things may have niche applications. I mean, even Dogecoin right now, people are using it to tip kind of in a fun, playful way. So you may see things like that, or Zero Coin, as designed around people really focus on anonymity because Bitcoin is proving to be less anonymous than it was sort of popularly hailed to be in the early days. But the trick is not creating a good technology or creating a more efficient technology. As the adoption is the really hard problem, and Bitcoin has achieved adoption and has not just a lot of people are using it, but a lot of people who have invested real money and resources behind it. This is what builds up the network effect, a combination of money, resources, and knowledge, and then other people whose technology is built on top of it. So I think Bitcoin is far and away the winner unless something surprising happens.
Is it a problem that actually the supply is limited? Is that?
It's essentially unlimited, right? Because it's almost infinitely divisible. So I don't think it's limited. You're gonna have 21 trillion coins, so it's pretty much unlimited.
Questions? Yeah.
So, did you talk about PayPal? They have meetups called Bitcoin and PayPal. Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, PayPal's not going to touch this until the money transfer license issue is all worked out. They're very well versed in this. They got a lot of lawyers. It's for the average PayPal user, it's probably not that important. But like anything, once a company gets big, it calcifies. I don't see innovation's not going to come out of eBay, for something in this next generation payment world. At least I don't think so.
And then you talk about Russia. As I remember, Bitcoin conference in San Jose, one of the hedge funds sponsors was Russian hedge fund. So I guess the big things, organizations, do own Bitcoins in Russia. It doesn't necessarily, maybe little people can own it. So.
Well, the CEO of Sberbank, which is Russia's largest bank, actually came out and said to kill Bitcoin would be stifling a great innovation. And he said it's amazing. He had nothing bad to say. At Davos, he was just going off about how great it is. I think the divide is definitely between the business side of the Russians and then the Russian government, which is obviously definitely opposed to it. The central bank and the commercial banks.
There's no control.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Next.
Yes, I have. So I come from Norway. I'm studying PhD in social entrepreneurship right now, 5th year. Where I come from in Norway, imagine like Palo Alto, and then like blow it up to 4 million people.
A lot of snow.
Right, but it's like
Really
so in Norway it works and it's very well regulated, and like everyone is paying with credit card, debit card, and like there's no difference between cash and cards, and it's so for Norway this is not very disruptive at all. And if you transfer money from one bank account to another, we haven't used checks for like 20 years. I don't remember it. So I think it's more disruptive in certain countries than in Norway, for instance.
But I think you're missing the point. It's the sideshow is that it's low transaction fees. When PayPal started for 3 years, there were no transaction fees, right? That's the unimportant part of it. I mean, at some point, these companies have to charge a transaction fee, right? So they will. It's the fact, and several people have said this, that the transactions are irreversible, right? If you may not care about that, but I guarantee you, if you're a merchant, you care about that, right? In some countries, chargebacks are 14 to 15%. 40% of the entire world is redlined. If you're a U.S. e-commerce company, you're not going to do business in Russia. You're not going to do business in most of the Middle East, in most of China. Why? Because you assume it's fraudulent. Now imagine if you didn't care. Imagine if you know for certain you're going to get paid. You can open up the world. You can do business with anybody, anytime, without any need for any identification. It's much more interesting to the merchant. A lot of what happens in the United States, consumers are insulated from. The fact that you can be entirely reckless with your credit card, and you can go and do business with a complete fraud, and you have no concern whatsoever. So to that extent, you could say, it's not using Bitcoin, it is definitely, the risk is borne by the person who owns the coin and is transferring it. But the merchants at some point are going to understand it. I would say today most of them really don't. But once they fully understand this, I would say to you, their view will be, we only want Bitcoin if that's all we could take transactions in, because we'll never have another chargeback or any other kind of loss.
It's also
ultimately, you can do as if Amazon was taking up all of its payments in Bitcoin. You think Amazon's not going to make sure that you are a satisfied customer? It's not. It's they can do. You can do whatever you want. It's just today, for instance, in Nigeria, a lot of you probably know that 170 million people in Nigeria. A friend of mine has an e-commerce company, believe it or not, in Nigeria. I was fascinated. 75% of the transactions they reject. Now imagine if you were a U.S. e-commerce company, right? You would obviously go out of business very fast. But they reject because fraud is obviously a big problem. It's not just a Nigerian email scam to U.S. people, it's also a problem for their own. If they had an ability, they don't today, for everybody paying Bitcoin, they could accept every transaction.
It's also extremely difficult for merchants to take digital payments in most of the world. I lived in Chile for 3 years. I tried to take Visa. I had money and everything. It was a 6-month process to get a card reader, 9% fee, $2,000 deposit. It was ridiculous. $80 smartphone, download an app, sign up with BitPay, done. You could be anywhere there's cell phone coverage. Somebody else comes up with their phone, money goes right in your account. Could not be easier. You could literally do that anywhere in the world. When we think about using credit cards, like for most of us it's easy, but the majority of the world doesn't accept credit cards, and you could literally leapfrog that with Bitcoin.
But this is the key point, I think, is by taking out the middleman. And by, if you think an entrepreneur in Norway, so let's put aside all the question about removing friction from the payment system, which sounds like is already a fairly functional electronic payment system. An entrepreneur in Norway who wants to build a financial services company still needs to go wait in the lobby of some Norwegian bank for 6 months or a year to be able to do a lot of the things that they want to do to build innovative services. When you have a system that's truly peer-to-peer, that's decentralized or built like the internet, you start to get the term you'll hear people say is permissionless innovation, but the 18-year-old entrepreneur in Norway or the 24-year-old entrepreneur in Nigeria or the 36-year-old entrepreneur in the United States can all build things themselves just by having access to the internet, and can build services that involve transactions and moving and storing and tracking value on top of this system. So we're going to see phenomenal innovation just in the way. Skype was built in Scandinavia, not by a telecom company, but by entrepreneurs who were able to access the internet to do it.
So what makes me excited is actually the blockchain, and how at some point you can even take money out of the equation, and then it's a transaction between two people, and it's largely based on trust, and that there's a mutual value to that. It's called, there's in UK, it's a big thing called time banks. We have that here too. But that's 10, 15 years down the road. But so my question is more, PayPal for me is amazing. They have like instant transfer, even though it takes 4 days for the money to come in. And when do you think that Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies is going to reach that level of friendliness in the user experience?
Well, by the way, if you're a merchant, you would not be saying what you say. I hate PayPal. As a merchant, they steal your money. They really do. 10 to 15% of your cash, those bastards never let you take it out. When there's a problem, any problem, the only way to communicate with PayPal is to go to Superior Court, which is what my companies typically do, and then you get a response. PayPal is hated by most merchants. One reason why merchants are willing to actually experiment with something that's a little scary, like Bitcoin, is that PayPal is so awful. It's not awful for all of us as consumers, but man, you've got $150,000 in your PayPal account, you try to take that out, good luck.
This may be the contrarian view on this panel, and I'm not answering your question directly, but I think it's a no-brainer for merchants to accept Bitcoin and then convert it to fiat. I think that's a no-brainer for all merchants. I think in the short term, I would be very skeptical of consumers actually at scale spending Bitcoin. If you look at the price volatility, I just don't imagine people doing that.
That's true.
So I think if you're an entrepreneur building for this ecosystem, you've got big guys like BitPay already taking care of merchant processing, and I think that will kind of grow slowly. But if your business depends on consumers spending Bitcoin, I think you might want to reconsider that. I think on the consumer side, the next two years, year to 2 years at least, until there's a little bit of stability in the price, which I don't think there may be for a while. I think Bitcoin on the consumer side is going to be used as a store of value. I think that's honestly what it's going to be. So I think you want to be thinking about business models that make sense for that use case. I don't think people are going to be transacting. I don't think the average person will be looking at their bank account and saying, hey, how much do I want to hold in Bitcoin so I can go spend it? That doesn't make any sense to me.
It does make sense though, because if the price goes up, we actually found that many people say, well, why would people spend Bitcoin because it is volatile? But you've got to realize that some people bought Bitcoin when it was $5, and now you know $600 or more. You could take that $5 and buy so much more with it. So actually, as the price goes up, we see that more people are spending Bitcoin through our company, because now they can go out and buy a Tesla with Bitcoin, or now they can do something that they wouldn't have been able to do before. So I think it's definitely, it's going to depend also on, you know, the Zyngas of the world. Or WordPress was big for us because at that point, the end of 2012, we had 1,000 merchants. Several months ago, it was about 10,000. Now we're at 24,000. By the end of the year, we're thinking 100,000. I mean, we're seeing rapid growth. So that's going to happen. More Tiger Directs are going to come forward. The tech people already know and they have Bitcoin, they want to spend it. And so, you know, definitely on the merchant side, but the consumer side, we need more companies that help consumers buy Bitcoin, because that seems to be the biggest question I get all the time is, how can I buy Bitcoin? And it's not so easy.
I think people get way too hung up on the price. I mean, adoption's consistently grown, and I think there's a lot of use cases that'll probably go the most where you don't hold your money in Bitcoin. So like remittance is a $500 billion a year business. So say I've got family down in Peru. I could buy the Bitcoin at the price right now. I don't care if it's at 10,000 or 50 bucks. I send it to my cousin in Peru, and he changes it into Peruvian soles right then. There's no loss. Compared to going to Western Union, they're going to charge me 10%, or some of these other companies on small transactions as high as 25%. And you get just screwed. Whereas with this, go into Bitcoin, take it out of Bitcoin. And it really doesn't matter what the price is at.
So I like remittance as a use case. I think the issue there is whether or not there are liquid exchanges in the local currencies that you're setting to. So until that happens, it's just a promise.
Oh yeah, it's just a matter of time too. Because right now, you know, you charge 5% and you make a killing, and you undercut the competition by half. It's ridiculous. And then as
Though I would say on the remittance side, even PayPal was never successful in that area, because, for instance, in the Philippines, you know, there's 75 years of Western Union, you know, and the degree of distrust in anything financial related outside of the U.S. and a few European companies is so massive that when you add new cryptocurrency, there's probably not even a word for it, and then, oh, by the way, you got to do this weird thing on the blockchain. I do think that's a very tall order in the short term, even for the fee savings. And as you say, I mean, it's unconscionable that, you know, it's 10% or a little above that, according to the World Bank, is what remittance payment costs are. And that 10%, which is about $550 billion, almost all that goes to the top 10 worldwide banks. It would be nice if we could get them to adopt it, but there's a high degree of, I think, of education.
I'm predicting something a little counterintuitive. I think it's actually going to start with the rich on remittances and work its way down. Because I think you're talking about companies that want to move 10 million bucks. They're not going to get screwed as much as the guy that's moving 500, but they're still getting squeezed by the banks. And I think you'll see them doing, you know, millions, billions of dollars eventually, and then it'll work its way down to the farmers in the fields moving 200 bucks.
So that's more global trade than individually rich people.
Exactly.
I think that's a good use case.
Both.
So David, for you, it's more B2B versus B2C, in terms of...
Doesn't fall neatly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think micropayments is a good potential use case. We've never seen any company really get that to work because their traditional financial system tax on, you know, the constant fee plus percentage, and the constant for micropayments is too big to dwarf. It dwarfs the entire payment itself. So I think Bitcoin could be a case there. I think if you look at a space like micropayments, actually it could be great for raising the profile in the public. You know, use cases like charity, for example, that would be fantastic for, you know, just you can imagine a poster story for your congressman for, you know, this charity was accepting 5 or 10% of their donations in this new thing, and that's actually helped. It's a great story, right? So I think there's some nice halo effects from, you know, if someone can get that a business like that to work as well. It'd be interesting.
Want to add something?
terms of economic exchanges, when you multiply the speed of exchanges and you add to that the super connectiveness of the world, don't you think that it's that it could be a dangerous thing from an economic point of view?
I actually don't fully understand what you mean.
I mean, the speed of exchanges, that increases the volatility of the thing.
Yeah, for instance, there's LIBOR, so you would change your interest of the exchange.
We're a long way away from it being big enough to have kind of worldwide impact. Maybe that, maybe someday, but, and I think, I hear what you're saying about commentary on things like high frequency trading and what that does to create volatility in US stock markets, but I think the pool value of all these alt currencies is so small that we're decades or light years. So I mean, I don't know when it would even matter.
But it's a space where speculation is done now. I mean, it's like any other stock or commodity or that you can play with. So it's just a transfer of volatility.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I still see it.
Yeah, I'd say that's, you probably won't hear anybody saying here volatility is great. It's not, stability would be better. But, I just think that's one of the conditions in which if you're a company in this market, you have to adopt to. You're right, it moves rapidly in price.
It creates a business opportunity for companies like BitPay as well.
I think it's just worth noting, like, volatility is a function of the time. The Bitcoin is in such an infancy that when we look at even if the chart looks like this today, when we look at it in the future, when we see it on sort of a full time scale, that volatility may not look like that much. And even if you look at volatility now versus volatility 3 months ago or 6 months ago, the more people who are coming in and out of the door, the less volatility you're going to see. So this is really just a question of maturation of the currency.
And the typical way you deal with volatility, of course, is to have people taking bets on both sides. That is hard to do. You can do it, but it's not easy. If you could short the currency, you would see much less volatility. And at some point, when there's a public vehicle maybe that has Bitcoin and whatnot, I think it won't be as volatile.
Yeah, it's only been around a few years, so.
Right. How big is that pool of Bitcoin? Any estimation? How big is
the pool of Bitcoin?
In circulation?
Yes. What's
I mean, the market cap? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah,
They call it almost 13 million coins. It's, I don't know what today's price is, but 8 billion, 8.5 billion market cap.
Okay.
So clearly infinitesimal,
yes.
Right? And therein lies one of the real concerns, right? One of the real issues. How does it lubricate the global commerce system when it's such a small piece of that system? $600 trillion. Of currency changes hand every year. And Bitcoin is, an $8 billion market cap. The velocity of Bitcoin money would have to be very, very, very high to be significant. So that's one reason why we don't mind it going up in value, if you want to call that volatility. When it hits $500 billion, let's say, I think it's, in an $80 trillion global economy, I think it's very, very useful. The biggest criticism of it now is, it's tiny, and you can't do a lot with it.
I have actually worked with a credit card processing company, so when you talk about the reserves and basically credit cards charge rates based off perceived risk. So Moto or online are way higher than they have to be until you get volumes where you can do interchange plus a couple cents. But I hear words like no fraud or no BitPay has no fees. I'm like, that's.
Well, there are some fees, so.
And they're going to be more the more people come
but we
in.
continue to lower our fees. So right now we've moved to a SaaS model. So you can pay, you can do 1% transaction fees, right? So that's a starter, because if you don't know how many people are going to be paying in Bitcoin, you may not want to pay a monthly fee. But the next step up is $30 a month. and you can run up to $10,000 worth of transactions on a daily basis. So the cost savings is definitely there. I mean, we do make a little bit of money from our merchants, but it's changing the payment space. So just because credit cards have been around since the 1950s doesn't mean that we have to use them forever. So back to, you know.
I completely agree,
yeah.
but what do you do when the credit cards react to what you're doing? You just lower all their fees and like lower the.
Oh, like they're gonna do that?
Well, no,
Yeah.
that's a good
The
point.
thing
So
is, that's
in 98, 99, PayPal launches, right? First of all, they all said it's irrelevant, you shouldn't use it. But at the time, if you were an online merchant, and IdeaLab, we had about 30 of them, we were paying on average 14%. Card not present over the web, right? And it was a long process too. Oh, are they venture backed and all that, right? PayPal comes and says it's free, ultimately charges whatever, 1.25 point if you're over $600 in transactions. The fees haven't gone down that much by the credit card companies still, you know?
They're not
So-
14%.
No, but that was an aberration. But if you look at the average merchants, right, how much of their fees dropped in the last 10 years? Not that much. So, which I think, by the way, is good news for the people here, because there's a price ceiling set by those groups of banks. And the fees, they're not going to want to lower the fees if they don't have to. What you're probably going to see is the Bitcoin companies start to increase fees. But one thing for sure, if you're a merchant, as you've learned on this panel, you're still way better off using Bitcoin if somebody will pay you in that.
I just don't know how you could use it online though, because if there's no return, then what's the consumer's protection?
The cashback.
What do you mean?
I mean,
what's
the company can
consumer's
return
protection?
it.
The company can do whatever it wants to do. It's just that the
But you
credit
can't
card
return-
company is
Yeah.
no longer responsible for you, the consumer, being reckless.
That's
Or
assuming
merchant
that
fraud.
yeah, what about the merchant being fraudulent, not producing?
There's all kinds of laws that are going to protect anybody. Whether we have the very same issues at PayPal, but what if somebody takes? Look, ultimately it's up to the merchants to decide, right, what they want to do,
Or consumers.
or consumers as well. Yeah, the consumer issue there is a real one, but my guess is, the merchants are going to make it very enticing to use Bitcoin because of the value they perceive in someone using it.
Right, use it on Amazon, not Craigslist. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think Andrew wants to ask a question.
Yeah, I was just looking at my phone and it says $74 million across 40 deals invested in Bitcoin startups by VCs in 2013. So 74 million, 40 companies. Which companies are leading in revenue that are operating in the Bitcoin space? Is there any data on that?
Was Docs.
Probably the exchanges,
The exchanges,
Coinbase and
yeah.
BitPay. That's my guess.
And like what's like a stadium number? Are they generating
Hundreds of millions.
hundreds of millions, and then of that they're getting like a 1% or maybe
Yeah.
the SaaS fee?
Yeah.
Yeah, think of 1% as the high end of what you would pay for an exchange fee. Coinbase charges 1%. It looks more like a retail brokerage. If you go and trade on Gox or you trade on Bitstamp, you're going to probably pay a little bit less than that. But then the volume's all on the internet. So, if you look at BitcoinCharts.com, you get back into it. But these are reasonable. These are very fast-growing, medium-sized businesses, but not huge businesses yet.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that I realize how brilliant Glide is. Because when
Thank
my
you.
son finds out,
Yeah.
he's going to go and get all the iPhones in the neighborhood. He's been trying to get the Litecoins and bringing computers to the house and trying to get it working. And so that's
I had
the
that
target
same
market.
instinct. I wanted
Yeah.
more Bitcoin, but I
Right.
didn't want to use money to get Bitcoin.
It's brilliant.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I wanted to throw
congratulations.
depreciating assets into a system and
Yeah.
get Bitcoin.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Did you pay her?
Yeah, right.
That's question.
Yes,
That's
I have
question.
a question about, like, so I teach a class called quantitative trading up at Berkeley, and we dedicated the entire spring semester a year ago to Bitcoins, and then in my 15 years of education, I have a master in finance too. So what I'm like, my question is more on the ROI. So I made a prediction in May 2013 that the peak value of Bitcoin is going to be the value of gold, and that came true, and then now it's half of that, and so. I think it's going to be a long time until it breaks through that psychological level there. And so there might not be the highest return on investment to buy and hold the Bitcoin, depending on what entry point you get in at. And then so what other coins do you think might have that in terms of both mining? Because mining Bitcoins is hard to, and which other coin are you bullish about?
Me personally, Ripple. I think just because it actually offers a lot of different things. And it offers a lot of things that banks can get behind. Like you can add the ability to only trade with people that have been KYC verified. I mean, that just, as soon as banks hear that, they're like, Jesus, that's great. I mean, I bring a 30-page anti-money laundering document to 90 banks. They tell me to get the hell out, that I spent 50 grand writing. So the fact that you can tell a bank, like, hey, only people that we've verified can trade with each other, they go nuts. So I think there's a lot of things about that could really, bring in increased adoption. Also, it just has a lot of other things built in. It removes some of the counterparties in Bitcoin. Like, look at Mt. Gox. It's just an utter disaster. It has been since near the beginning. I'm not going to be nice. It needs to die. But it's a huge counterparty. Like, I don't have anything good to say about it. So it's a third of the Bitcoin is stuck there or transacts there. It used to be even more. So you're talking about a distributed currency that has this huge central, point of failure. And I think with Ripple, you can kind of distribute things even beyond just the assets itself. So I'd say Ripple's got a fairly good shot. Altcoins, I'm not too bullish on.
I'd say from a pure speculation standpoint, and I'm not a speculator, but it seems like a lot of people are trending a little bit towards Litecoin and Dogecoin.
Yeah.
Just from I think it will go up, so I'm going to mine something.
Right,
so
right.
Does it mean they're real currencies long term? I don't know.
I'm of the same opinion that you could probably make some money speculating in Litecoin. So I've seen a graph looking at, if you look at the ratio of the volume of transactions in Bitcoin over the volume of transactions, trades in Litecoin, or Litecoin over Bitcoin, that ratio has gone up every time there was a crash. So what that tells me is that people are treating Litecoin as a hedge against Bitcoin. So once you're in the virtual world, if you want to hedge against Bitcoin, you basically sell your Bitcoin and buy Litecoin. That's what I'm. That's how what I take within that.
And I think there are some miners, like the small scale miners, that can't really compete in Bitcoin anymore. They're basically throwing their compute assets to get Litecoin and exchange it to Bitcoin on an exchange. So I think that's creating some.
Bill, if you could explain mining,
so if you guys understand this whole ledger system, every time there's a transaction, there's a transaction and that gets recorded and it gets kind of distributed through the peers. So there's sort of every 10 minutes there's a competition, so to speak, to be the printer of that ledger that propagates, and so there are little things you can download or algorithms you can run to win those competitions, and if you win them, I think it says 25 coins get distributed every 10 minutes, and so
expectation.
So people are basically competing for those coins. So there are actually, I was out, as I mentioned, I was on Necker Island last week with the guy that kind of created the whole Gcash thing, and he bought an island in Finland on cold water, and he has I think he told me he has 6,000 servers. And I think through his slush pool, he's like 40% of the mining these days or something like that. But it's amazing the investment that has gone into these things. So you can't compete anymore in that game. And he found a bunch of Russian dudes from the military to design custom silicon, not even with sort of like Synopsys tools. He has custom chips, fully custom chips on these blades that are just like crunching away. So really hard to do that, but people basically have thrown hardware assets at this problem to try to collect coins.
All right. Well, thank you. Join me and
this is not invested in.
Yeah. No. Thank you. And,